All right, everyone, as promised, here's a warning about a con job that I see happening, a neocon and neo-lib con job, that is, and what you can probably expect to happen from here on out, depending on what happens with the Trump kangaroo court non-trial, the legal non-entity that never should have been pursued. Of course, for the one person out there not already aware, Donald Trump becoming the first U.S. president to be criminally indicted, actually getting fingerprinted and booked the other day. I don't think the charges mean anything. There's a reason why the next in-person hearing is scheduled all the way ahead in December. That's pretty far into the campaign season now, isn't it? You're running up on the subsequent year in which the clock is continuously ticking because we have basically a year-long presidential election process at this point. Interesting timing. Yes, very, very intriguing. It's totally coincidental that they're slow-walking the trial. If it's such a slam dunk with Donald Trump doing so much wrong, get him in next week. And then start going through the evidence and tell Trump the specific charges and let him gather exculpatory evidence and fucking proceed with the trial. But they're not even holding the next hearing until December. It's high on their priority list, you see. Here's my worry. I think that what's going to happen is that the Republicans will do what they're now doing with ballot harvesting, which again is like, in that case, it's necessary, but it's still a mistake. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The problem is that the Republicans are now going to face pressure from within the party to use their power at the state level, where they control things, to do what Alvin Bragg just did. So they're going to attempt to go after politicians who have ever served or resided in their states on charges, some of which will be meaningful, some of which will be meaningless. They're going to attempt to do that. Firstly, you hyper-politicize the atmosphere. People will be tempted to move to states that have a sympathetic legal system, so you're going to see a further divergence from states that are generally led by a few urban areas like New York, California. They'll hemorrhage Republicans or people that are on the right, and red states in those urban enclaves, like in Texas, like in Austin, where there are leftists, they'll be tempted to leave too, and you'll have more animus between actual human beings within the U.S. That's at the citizen level. At the prosecutorial level, my worry is that you're going to end up with legal crusading on both sides. Now, some people would say, well, it's about time the Republicans fought back. Look at this bullshit. They're going after Trump for nothing. Well, we'll go after Hillary, and we'll go after Eric Holder. And let me stop you there. Here's the problem. That legal system that you seek to weaponize is controlled not by MAGA Republicans, where the Republicans predominate. It is primarily controlled by Cornyn and Romney and the Bushes, the big money Republicans, the ones that fund the fucking races and shit that affect those court systems and who the prosecutor is, etc., is applicable. It's controlled by Uniparty GOP. This takes me back to something that happened under the Obama administration, the IRS scandal, in which Lois Lerner, the fall girl, it was Obama's idea. We know that he knew about it. It's bullshit that he heard it first on CNN. See, the same excuses with Fast and Furious. His fingerprints are all over it. If one person, by the way, does deserve to actually be indicted and looked into, it's Eric Holder. Above anyone else from that administration, the worst. Be funny to look into Dick Cheney and see what he's been up to with his oil investments. Anyway, statute of limitations probably long dead, deader than his fucking heart. The third one that's been in his chest, I think. Here's the problem. With the IRS scandal, it was cast off as a scandal wherein an Obama administration that was far left began weaponizing the IRS to headhunt via audits or opposing nonprofit status generally, both of those, going after groups that were associated with the Tea Party. Now, here's the evidence that I see. Those groups overwhelmingly were groups outside of the Uniparty GOP's control. Tea Party groups, which recoalesced. The weaker Tea Partyists have become mainline neocons mostly at this point, or they're niche evangelicals. The rest of them got fucked. They got fucked out of office, by and large. The Uniparty destroyed them. That's why the Tea Party largely fell apart within a few years. That and constant Boehnerite obstruction weighing heavily on people and convincing them that maybe it was not such a good idea after all. The problem is that they also targeted left-wing groups. Lois Lerner's IRS also went after progressive fronts. heavily, almost as heavily as they did Republican-led groups. And those Republican-led groups, they were populistic or evangelical. They were outside of that core neocon group. I think that the same thing, and by the way, the news of the progressive groups getting fucked in the ass was largely covered up at the time. The public were like a bunch of lemmings. There was barely any mention of the opposite from attacking the far right also having happened simultaneously. No, it was cast off as the far left is trying to stop conservatives. Well, no, it was really that the liberals, not the leftists, because they weren't in charge of anything, not Bernie Sanders, not AOC, but the corporate neoliberal core partnered with the corporate GOP to force both fringe groups or extremes out of office, to screw them over any way that they could. If you therefore weaponize the legal system, there's also a tie-in to CRT that I'll briefly mention in a moment. What you'll get is Uniparty GOPers will be permitted to go after non-liberal Democrats, destroy the AOCs, destroy the progressive PACs, etc. Now, while I don't like progressivism and socialism, that's a misuse of the legal system by a group that is empowered by corporations. It's entrenched, it's oligarchic. Meanwhile, the GOP insiders will allow the Dem liberals to retaliate. It'll be a constant retaliatory sort of situation. And they'll go after MAGA, or they'll go after, the remnant Tea Party evangelicals or something. Nobody's going to be targeting the Bushes. Nobody's going to go after Hillary Clinton. That's not what will happen. That's a pie-in-the-sky pipe dream if you think that that's what the legal system incepted by the Uniparty will be retooled to do. You'll have a handful of instances where that's successful. Out of a handful of states. But how many Democrats are in North Dakota? At this point, how many Democrats would be subject to a Floridian investigation? They're all gone by now. It's not going to happen. How many actual core Republicans live in New York? No, they have their base in Texas or something. They will be favored because they have the money. They created the legal system. The tie-in to CRT is one of the things I spoke of in my book, Debunking Critical Race Theory. It argues that you can take the Ring of Sauron and use it against Mordor. The legal system was created by white people for white people to oppress everyone else. Let's empower it more in order to get more equity and to have retribution against the racist system. We're going to use the racist system against racism. That's not how it works, Cupcake, and that's not how this will work either. It's a goddamn con job. When you see people saying, well, let's weaponize the prosecution against the Dems, notice who they think they're going to target and then think about how accurate that depiction is. No, they won't be targeting Hillary. She's above the law in the most literal sense. What we should be arguing for is reducing the scope of the law, reducing everyone's ability to misuse the bloated legal system, ripping it apart and reforming it. If anything, right now we probably need a constitutional convention. We need to focus on state legislatures, get a convention going, and then cock-block the judiciary from this type of activism in the future. I would argue there are other amendments that we should have too. Internet Bill of Rights should be codified, along with getting rid of the NFA and a few other things we can tinker with, but that can wait. If we're going to put the genie back in the bottle, this arguably requires a constitutional amendment. Instead, it'll be like, corporate donations into political campaigns. When the Supreme Court made the Citizens United decision years ago, people on both sides of the aisle balked and then ultimately ignored it. They could have taken care of the problem then, and they chose not to. It's a perennial issue in elections, most elections, and by most candidates, but they never follow through. It'll be the same here. Well, we need to stop this prosecutorial misconduct, but on the sly, we're going to weaponize it too. But you're not going to be able to knock out the corporate neoliberals that way. It's just feeding their game fucking more, especially in a nation with this dumb football team, us versus them mentality subjugate to partisan groups which comprise multiple actual blocks of ideology. The Republican Party is not just conservative, and the Democrats are not just liberal. No, you've got liberals, core corporate liberals, the oligarchic types, and core corporate conservatives, the oligarchic types there. They're all pro-war. They're all pro-corporate bailouts. They're all anti-you. They're all anti-me. They would piss on you regardless of what stripe of color you're wearing when you go and vote. Then you've got the progressives. Then you've got the Union Dems. Then you've got the former Union Dems turned vague populists. Then you've got MAGA. Then you've got MAGA Light. You've got the Tea Party / evangelical core. You've got all these different groups of people under these broad headers which are thereby rendered useless. So no, I do not support weaponizing the prosecutorial system. I support de-weaponizing the prosecutorial system. And people arguing otherwise have not fully thought out the convolutions of how the U.S. political and legal system really work, because they're fucking goddamn ignorant. That's about all. Peace out.